There have been many claims over recent years that meat causes type 2 diabetes. In Western countries, overall meat consumption has gone up slightly this century, and diabetes prevalence has gone up a lot this century. So it'd be fair to say there appears to be a correlation there. However, I'm only concerned with whether there is a connection between red meat consumption and diabetes, because red meat is the most nutrient dense and, in my opinion, the healthiest. And by red meat, I mean mostly beef, veal, goat, and wild meats. So let's take a look at beef consumption over time in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia as examples, and the corresponding diabetes rates in those three countries. Red meat consumption in the US has steadily dropped by around 20% since 1970. And since the year 2001, diabetes rates have increased by around 30%. That is what we call a negative correlation. Beef consumption has gone down and diabetes prevalence has gone up. So how could red meat cause diabetes if we get more diabetes when we eat less red meat? Or does this suggest red meat could actually be protective against diabetes? Well, let's look at the UK then. And as you can see, beef and veal consumption has dropped by around 50% since 1974. And yet, diabetes prevalence more than doubled between the year 2000 and 2021. Another negative correlation. Or in Australia, where the rate of beef consumption has dropped enormously since the late 1970s, as depicted in this chart, while diabetes prevalence has risen by around 60% since the year 2000. Clearly, a very strong negative correlation. If there is no positive correlation between red meat consumption and increasing diabetes rates, then how can red meat be the cause? You've heard people say correlation does not necessarily mean causation. Well, that's true. But what you can say with 100% certainty is that lack of corresponding correlation, as in this case, does categorically guarantee lack of causation. So how about this study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2023, which has received a terrific amount of coverage lately? It claims that people who eat just 2 servings of red meat per week may have an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to people who eat fewer servings. Just 2 servings represents an increased risk, they say. If we look back to 1970 and 1980 and 1990, most people in developed countries were having way more than 2 servings per week, and diabetes rates were much lower than now. And over time, they reduced their servings of red meat and diabetes rates went up. People are following the advice they have been given. They're eating less red meat, and yet the diabetes epidemic worsens. So the study I just mentioned also showed that those who ate the most red meat also ate the most calories, drank the most alcohol, smoked the most cigarettes, ate the least fruits and vegetables, and exercised the least. Now, let's be fair and address the issue that the statistics on red meat consumption and diabetes rates in the US, UK and Australia have some limitations. While the red meat consumption numbers for the 3 countries are probably reasonably accurate, the diabetes rates can be subject to a few confounding factors, including a higher rate of more recent diagnosis due to more comprehensive healthcare systems. Even so, the disparity is just too dramatic to allow for any confusion. In the UK, red meat consumption has dropped 50% and diabetes prevalence has risen by over 100%. This is too extreme for confounding factors to be responsible. Red meat does not cause diabetes and is most likely highly protective. If you found this information useful, then please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And I'll see you in the next one.